The observation deck of the Salvation's Edge hummed with nervous energy as Leora pressed her palm against the reinforced transparasteel window. Beyond the barrier, the jungle moon of Keshar 7 stretched endlessly, a writhing mass of bioluminescent foliage and predators that had claimed 17 colony ships in the past decade. "You're insane," Captain Hendricks said behind her. "That thing out there has killed creatures twice your size without breaking stride." Leora didn't turn around. Her eyes were fixed on the predator queen, a magnificent horror of obsidian scales and razor-sharp limbs that measured 20 meters from snout to tail. The queen prowled the perimeter of their crashed vessel, her 6 eyes gleaming with cold intelligence. 3 rows of teeth glistened in the moonlight, each fang capable of piercing ship-grade armor. "I'm not going after her," Leora replied quietly. "I'm going after them." She pointed toward the clearing where 5 juveniles, cubs really, huddled beneath a collapsed tree. They were barely larger than earth wolves, their scales still soft and mottled with youthful patterns. One of them, smaller than the rest, kept trying to crawl toward the ship, toward the emergency rations that Leora had been dropping near the perimeter for 3 days. "The little one's starving," Leora continued. "The queen's too focused on us to hunt. She's protecting them, but they're dying anyway. So let them die," Hendricks snapped. "In 48 hours, rescue arrives. We just need to survive until then." Leora finally turned to face him. "Humans don't survive by hiding, Captain. We survive by making allies in impossible places." She was already walking toward the airlock. The Kesharan air hit her like a physical force, humid, thick with spores that her suit's filters barely managed. Leora's boots squelched in the phosphorescent moss as she stepped away from the ship. Behind her, the airlock sealed with a finality that made her stomach clench. The Predator Queen's head snapped toward her instantly. Those 6 eyes narrowed and a sound like grinding metal erupted from her throat. It was a warning that needed no translation. Leora held up her hands, palms open. In her right hand, she carried a med kit. In her left, a package of protein bars, the emergency rations that had attracted the smallest cub. "Easy," she whispered, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words but hoping her tone conveyed peace. "Easy, Mama. I'm not here for you." The queen took a step forward. Then another. Her massive claws carved trenches in the soft earth. Leora's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held her ground. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew that running meant death. Instead, she knelt. Slowly, deliberately, she placed the med kit and protein bars on the ground. Then she shuffled backward on her knees, making herself smaller, less threatening. The queen paused, her head tilted, confusion flickering across her alien features. From the collapsed tree, a small sound emerged, a whimper. The smallest cub, the one Leora had been watching, was crying. Its scales had lost their luster, and even from this distance, Leora could see its ribs pressing against its hide. She took a calculated risk. Leora stood and walked, not toward the queen, but toward the cubs. She angled her approach so the queen could intercept if needed, making her intentions clear. She wasn't hunting. She was helping, the queen roared. It was a sound that shook leaves from trees and sent every other creature in the jungle fleeing. Leora's knees nearly buckled, but she pressed forward. "I know," she said aloud, her voice steady despite her terror. "I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But your baby is dying, and I can help." She reached the collapsed tree. The cubs scattered, all except one. The smallest, the one she'd been watching, stayed put. Its eyes met hers, and in that moment Leora saw something she recognized. Desperation. "Hey there," she whispered, crouching down. "I'm Leora. You look like you could use a friend." She unwrapped a protein bar and held it out. The cub sniffed cautiously, then lunged forward and devoured it in 3 gulps. Behind her, the queen growled but didn't attack. Leora pulled out another bar. This time, a second cub crept closer. Then a third. "That's it," she murmured. "I'm not so scary, am I?" The smallest cub, she decided to call him Breck, pressed against her leg. His scales were cool and rough, but when she gently scratched behind what passed for his ears, he made a sound like a contented purr. Then Vrek did something that changed everything. He rushed toward her, not in attack, but in trust. He climbed into her lap, trembling and weak, and buried his head against her chest. The other cubs followed his lead, surrounding her in a protective circle of scales and claws. And the predator queen retreated. She stepped back, her 6 eyes wide with something that looked almost like shock. Her massive head lowered, and that grinding metal growl softened into something else entirely. A question, perhaps, or an acknowledgement. Leora sat very still, cubs piled around her as the queen approached. This was the moment. This was where she'd learn if her gamble had paid off. The queen's massive head came within inches of Leora's face. She could smell the creature's breath, sharp and metallic, could see her own reflection in those 6 intelligent eyes. Then the queen did something extraordinary. She lay down. She positioned herself between Leora and the jungle, her body forming a protective barrier. Her tail curled around the group, creating a fortress of scales and muscle. "Well," Leora whispered to Rek, who was now sleeping soundly in her arms, "I guess we're family now." When rescue arrived 2 days later, they found an impossible sight. A human woman sleeping peacefully in the shadow of Kashar VII's most feared predator, surrounded by purring cubs, all of them safe. Captain Hendricks stood at the airlock speechless. "How?" he finally managed. Leora smiled, gently passing Rek back to his mother's waiting claws. "Humans have been making friends with things that could kill us since we domesticated wolves, Captain. Sometimes the scariest monsters just need to see that we're not the threat. We're the solution." The Predator Queen watched as Leora walked back to the ship. Just before the airlock closed, the Queen raised her head and released a sound. Not a roar this time, but something softer. A goodbye, perhaps, or maybe a promise, Vrek. Now fed and strong, stood at his mother's side and chirped once, a sound that unmistakably meant friend, and Leora knew that humanity had just made its first ally on Keshar VII.